Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Man 901. So in this episode I'm going to talk about Infinity Crusade, which is basically the third part of the Infinity Saga kind of thing. This is from 1993, and I'm just going to do a bit of a recap before this. It starts with Thanos having the Infinity Stones and placing them in the Infinity Gauntlet. This is in Infinity Gauntlet from 1991. He becomes a god, eventually the heroes defeats him and Warlock gets the Gauntlet and becomes basically a god himself. However, he decides to basically try to become more of a neutral god, as he was basically going a little bit crazy with the power. So he basically decided to split up into, basically take away all his good and bad qualities and just having the neutral part of himself left. This, however, basically recreated the Magus. The Magus is basically the evil part of Warlock, and he later on actually finds some cosmic cubes after this and actually starts the whole Infinity War, which is from 1992. So he basically creates evil doppelgangers, tries to take over the world, and eventually is defeated by Warlock and the other heroes again, naturally, and basically is placed inside Soul World, which is basically a world inside the Soul Gem. Anyway, now we're gonna talk about the good side of Warlock that he basically expelled. This is the goddess, which is basically a feminine good side of him. So this basically starts with Infinity Crusade issue 1, that the goddess is basically introduced to Warlock as he basically looks into the whole eternal globe thing that he got from Eternity. That basically lets him see a lot of different things. Anyway, he sees Goddess and she basically attacks him and Warlock disappears. Now, Goddess basically had, when she was created or reborn or however you want to see it, she had apparently been looking for certain cosmic cubes or something like that as well. The same that Magus has done before, but she has basically overdone it. So she is extremely powerful, and she is actually basically converting people who has religious beliefs and basically making them follow her. So she basically converts Living Lightning, Sasquatch, Black Knight, Namorita, and many more. She actually basically makes these people, by their own free will, so to speak, go through certain portals and be teleported away. So naturally the heroes gathers once again, as this is kind of what they do when something very strange happens, the way that they did in Infinity Gauntlet when people just disappeared, or how they did when the evil doppelganger started attacking people. So they gather, basically tries to gather intel on what's happening. No one of them actually knows what's going on. This is of course the X-Men, Avengers, Fantastic Four, New Warriors and the likes. While they gather and talk, the goddess actually created or recreated Paradise Omega, which is basically placed where the Counter-Earth was. If you don't know what Counter-Earth is, that's basically where the planet that the High Evolutionary actually created, took or whatever, and basically created a opposite reality to this Earth. So it's basically placed on the other side of the sun, and it's basically now recreated as a paradise, as Eden, or however you want to see it, as Paradise Omega, and she basically created this huge cathedral where people would gather. So a lot of issues actually tie into this one, the same as it was in Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity War, and I'm actually going to go through them as well. Some of them have very little to do with the whole story, but others have a lot. So I'm basically just going to go through all of these as well. So I'm going to continue now with Iron Man issue 294 and 295. Basically, Iron Man is out in space and he is contacted by the goddess, who is trying to basically recruit him. Now, she knows that he is very much into technology and stuff like that, which is not something that she believes is something that has to do with religion, so she's already a little bit knowing that he will probably say no, but she was still trying to get him as he's a very important part. As she basically predicted, he completely rejected her proposal, and she then basically tells him that, okay, go through what you're gonna do out here and then I will contact you again and see if you change your mind. Basically. Anyway, Iron Man fights this very powerful, very mean, technological creature called Technovore, who almost kills him several times, but he eventually managed to defeat it. And then naturally the goddess basically contacts him again, and yet again Iron Man rejects her. Stone Cold rejects her. So we're gonna go to Warlock and the Infinity Watch issue 18. as I said in Infinity Crusade, it's going to be a lot of repetition here actually, unfortunately, but get a bit more intel actually on things going on. Anyway, Gamora and Moondragon, they basically joined the goddess, and Warlock was gone, so basically just Pip, Maxam and Drax were left on the Monster Island in their headquarters. So Pip, naturally, being the only one who actually had half a brain between all of them, basically decided that he's gonna be the leader. So he runs off, gets some kind of costume that he had picked up from time back, and becomes Pip-Man. Eventually, though, he decides that probably needs someone with a bit more technological know-how, so he basically kidnaps Mr. Fantastic. He just pops out, gets him, pops back with him. There's a bit of a fight, stuff like that. Eventually, Mr. Fantastic tries to investigate where the others went, and they go to Warlock's bedroom and finds the Eternal Globe, or whatever it's called, and they see the goddess. They learn that the goddess is the menace behind everything, and eventually the Infinity Watch and Mr. Fantastic are teleported by Pip over to Avengers Mansion. So we're gonna skip over now to Doctor Strange, Volume 3, Issue 54, where Doctor Strange learns of the goddess as well, but not in the same manner, and at this time he's basically very limited in his magic, as the gods or the magical powers that he had been using all these years, and basically have rejected him, as he did not want to be a soldier in their war, basically. So he runs off to Eternity to get his power, basically, to get power back, basically. So he decides in a desperate attempt to basically challenge Eternity, but he fails. Now in Alpha Flight issue 122, the goddess recruits Sasquatch, Puck, Windshare and Talisman. Yeah, that's basically just it. Marc, Spector, Moon Knight issue 56. Moon Knight is recruited by the goddess as well, as he has a lot of basically religious or spiritual beliefs. Now in the Mighty Thor issue 463, the goddess tries to recruit Thor as well, and he's pretty much into it actually, but at this time he has this kind of imaginary, somewhat creature called the Valkyries, basically luring him and seducing him in a way. So naturally the goddess fought Valkyrie and defeated Valkyrie, and then Thor joined her, basically. In West Coast Avengers Volume 2, 96, Living Lightning is acting very weird, so is Scarlet Witch, basically attacking people of her own team, basically, and US Agent is also acting very strange. And all of them have been actually recruited by the goddess. So back to the Mighty Thor issue 464 now. Thor is over at Paradise Omega. He sees all these people, all these heroes, and thinks everything is great. Now the first issue actually of Warlock Chronicles issue 1. So basically Warlock, after he disappeared, after fighting Goddess in the beginning of this whole storyline, he ended up in a strange dimension actually, and finds Darklore and some other Wisp character, and he basically tries to explore this place, trying to get to basically find some kind of meaning to it all, I guess. He actually sees this tear or damage to the base of reality, and figures that the guy who has the reality stone must have done it, so he goes off to find him. In Infinity Crusade issue 2 now, we see the 30 cosmic cubes that the goddess is using. 30 cosmic cubes, that is an extremely amount of power. And she basically had them all inside a cosmic egg, where there's basically a bit of a harmony between all the 30, basically making her extremely powerful. Meanwhile, Aurora of the Alpha Flight is basically a schizophrenic. She has two different sides, two different personalities. One of them is Aurora, who is basically just not that into religion and stuff like that. Then there's Jean-Marie Bobbier, or whatever you call it. Yeah. She is very religious, and when she kind of switches personalities, Jean-Marie is of course lulled by the goddess, basically, so she wants to get to the goddess. So the heroes actually use this to travel to the goddess. Vision, Iron Man and Mr. Fantastic basically gets Aurora with them into this space traveling Quinjet kind of thing, and then goes off into space. They find Paradise Omega, and at this time the goddess actually inside Paradise Omega itself, actually down at the core where the cosmic egg is, inside the egg she basically meditates to increase her power. the heroes are basically rejected actually by the goddess herself, and basically throws them out. Aurora stays. So now over to Web of Spider-Man issue 104. So Spider-Man is kind of a special character, as most of you probably know. It's a lot to do with his spider sense, as this is such a mystery really. I mean, this spider sense, this sense that he has, is basically telling him that something is wrong here. So he has high doubts about what's actually going on here. He feels like, I mean, it feels great here, but still feels wrong somehow. A Moondragon, who is now basically the right hand of the goddess while she's down in the egg meditating. Moondragon is basically sensing this doubt, and she decides to fight him. Now in Doctor Strange Volume 3 issue 55, Strange, who was also recruited, has high doubts about what's going on as well, and it's a bit of a somewhat of a what if issue here, where he basically feels that Dormammu is alive, and how he maybe had been a disciple of Dormammu instead, and yeah, I don't know, it's a little bit weird. So we go into the Mighty Thor issue 465. So the Skrulls, among many other beings in the galaxy, were affected by the gods as well, but the Super Skrull was not, and he is appalled over the fact that all his other Skrulls basically are just peaceful and happy, and just happy, and he feels like this is like an attack or something is very wrong here. So he basically goes off to find the source to this. So he basically went towards Paradise Omega, but Thor had been ordered to go and stop him. So Thor fights Super Skrull in a pretty nasty fight. Over in Alpha Flight issue 123 and issue 124, Witchfire is basically messing around with Talisman and Sasquatch's mind, even though Witchfire is actually on Earth. She actually managed to somehow get to them. Eventually she is basically stopped by the other Alpha Flight, who is on Earth as well, but Sasquatch, Talisman, Puck and Windshear basically come to Earth to punish her for her doings. We also have Darkhawk issue 30, where Darkhawk basically has a lot of feelings toward this all these amazing things that's happening, all these horrible things that's happening, and of course the problem that he has at home as well. Yeah, not much of a crossover really, but yeah. So in Warlock Chronicles issue 2, Warlock basically came to the person who had the reality gem, which to me at least was a huge surprise when I found out is actually Thanos. So Thanos actually had the reality gem itself. He tells Warlock that this is not my doing, this whole Terran reality, and that it's probably the goddess. Warlock basically asked for help, and Thanos basically said that I will help you in a little while. I will have to do some things here first. So Warlock is basically teleported back to Monster Island. This actually continues in Warlock and Infinity Watch issue 19, where Thanos basically gathers information or intelligence by basically watching the heroes on Earth and checking in on the Celestials, see if they knew, but they had no idea what was going on. And meanwhile, Gamora's having doubts, but Moondragon quickly basically beats the doubts out of her. Very brutally actually, which basically shows the true nature of this whole belief thing. Apparently Cage issue 17 was a bit of a crossover as well, only I can barely see the crossing over, so to speak, actually the tie-ins here, so basically I was gonna mention that. Over in Web of Spider-Man issue 105, Spider-Man continues to fight Moondragon and then fights the believers as well, the converted ones. And this actually continues in Marc Spector Moon Knight issue 57, where Moon Knight is set out to hunt down Spider-Man. Moving on to Infinity Crusade issue 3, where Uatu, the Watcher, basically explains to the heroes about the goddess's power, that she has extremely powerful telepathic abilities, but they are basically different from any other telepathic abilities that he has encountered anyway, because of the fact that they are basically on a different frequency. It's difficult to actually stop this ability and stop this attack basically, and he basically tells them that Paradise Omega is basically the goddess's weakness. Meanwhile, the goddess's influence in the universe increases the more she meditates inside this cosmic egg. And jumping over to the heroes now, interesting thing actually happens where the absorbing man basically jumps down into Avengers mansion, and the heroes immediately believes that this is gonna be a huge fight. Only he actually surrenders to them. Basically says that I don't want to fight, I don't want to do anything bad, I want to surrender to you all. So that's kind of one of those things that makes you doubt that God is actually evil. So the heroes actually try to figure out if they're gonna attack the goddess or not, if she's bad or if she's good. And that's, like I said, it's a very difficult thing to actually figure out. Eventually, though, the heroes, the unconverted naturally, basically came up to the idea that the free will is basically taken away, so this can't be a good thing. People will have to be able to choose to do good or bad things, otherwise it's not good or bad, it's just things. Meanwhile, Mephisto actually joined Warlock and Thanos, basically telling them that I have some information that you want to have, and all I want is basically, after you finish with all these things, I want one of these cosmic cubes, these cosmic containers, just one. It's a bit of a discussion actually whether or not they will do this. Meanwhile, Professor X is actually telepathically contacting Moondragon, trying to get her to basically calm down this whole thing and actually talk this out, doing things peacefully. But she basically just completely refuses this. So the heroes plan to cause a disrupt of harmony in the cosmic cubes. Mr. Fantastic had created this kind of gun thing. This would naturally basically cause the cubes to not work together, so the power will be very limited from then on. However, the goddess knew this, and she basically changed the harmonic signal or whatever that the cosmic cubes had, and thus basically foiling that plan. Meanwhile, she also told the converted ones to basically bomb Earth. They had this huge bomb that we're gonna send off into Manhattan, basically level many buildings and such. However, the Silver Surfer eventually actually realized the truth about the goddess, and he completely rejected her and her beliefs, which caused some discussion. Meanwhile, Pip, he actually teleported onto the cosmic egg, and by touching the egg he basically got the cubes to do his bidding basically. So he turned the goddess into salt and then became the most powerful being in the entire universe. However, now in Doctor Strange Volume 3 issue 56, it's actually just a small crossover tie-in thing here, where basically Doctor Strange, his ghost image or whatever, basically went to Earth, took over Wong, and went over some personal things. And in West Coast Avengers 97, not much happens there actually either, as in to tie-in thing to the whole storyline, so I'm just gonna jump that one. However, now in Darkhawk issue 31, the heroes were flying off towards Paradise Omega. The heroes basically were not really getting along. It's a lot of tension, and actually a fight broke out between many of the heroes, among them Darkhawk, which eventually actually caused a damage to the ship. However, it was fixed and basically a lesson learned. Now in Silver Sable and Wild Pack issue 16 and 17, the Wild Pack and Intruders basically fought the Biogenes and Hydra. Eventually, basically just a fight, not much of a tie-in either actually. Things kinda ended peacefully. However, now in Warlock Chronicles issue 3, Mephisto revealed to Thanos, and Warlock after Thanos basically agreed to the proposal that Mephisto would have one of the cosmic cubes. And Mephisto revealed that these cubes were basically alive, even if they were in a weird state basically. I mean, look at the Beyonder, he's basically one of the cubes as well, however probably not one of these cubes, but the cubes were basically just alive, and they had some kind of moral compass, so it couldn't actually affect souls and the likes with them, but if you have enough faith, you can actually force it. So this is probably how the goddess actually done this. By having all the faith of all the believers, she was growing more powerful, and basically that is how she was able to do what she was doing, basically changing people's minds. Meanwhile, Warlock again tried to get help from Eternity, but again, he failed. Eternity isn't exactly Warlock's biggest fan, so... He did, however, learn the goddess's plan, and he decided to share this with Thanos with the Soul Gem, actually giving Thanos the gem, and Warlock basically ended up in Soul World. Thanos naturally learned the plan and realized that this is exactly what they have to fight, how they're gonna stop this basically. In Warlock and the Infinity Watch issue 20, Pip is beaten by Silhouette. He's basically just daydreaming about what he's gonna do with all this power, and Silhouette basically just comes behind him and beats him. And the goddess gets back in power again, and yeah, it's just back to the way it was just a few issues ago. And yet again, Warlock is in Soul World. In Silver Surfer Volume 3 issue 83, Silver Surfer basically fights Firelord. Firelord is basically sent there to fight the Blasphemer, so to speak. Eventually Silver Surfer beats his old friend. Infinity Crusade issue 4, Thanos joins forces with Silver Surfer and goes to the heroes, gets Professor X, who is now in a basically catatonic state after having fought Moondragon and lost miserably. And Professor X is then placed in Thanos' ship, and Thanos basically explains the plan to Silver Surfer that, well, basically the Surfer he basically absorbs cosmic energy in order to be as powerful as he is. So the plan is to make Silver Surfer basically absorb a sun, and then he's basically hurled at Paradise Omega. So the Hulk and Drax basically directs him onto the moon, which Silver Surfer crashes straight through, and then Thor is sent out to fight Hulk and Drax. So the moon of Paradise Omega was basically a shield, but now it's broken, so people are now being able to land on the planet. Meanwhile, in Soul World, Warlock meets and speaks to Magos, his evil self. This actually continues in Warlock Chronicles issue 4, where the conversation turns into a huge fight. Magos basically will not help, and he is really upset. He's really upset at Warlock, and he fights him, and pretty nasty fight. Basically the entire issue is just the fighting, and eventually, well, Magos not helping. So over to Silver Surfer Volume 3, issue 84 and 85. Silver Surfer crashes down onto Paradise Omega. He's very injured and very weak, and Storm and Wonder Man basically turns up and beats the crap out of Silver Surfer. However, he will eventually get back his power and his health, and he beats the two heroes senseless. Infinity Crusade issue 5, on Paradise Omega, the heroes lands, and the converted and the unconverted basically fight. Nasty fighting all over the place. Eventually Thanos confronts the goddess at the Cosmic Egg, and the goddess starts the whole rapture thing that she had planned all along, which actually is basically exploding the suns in the whole galaxy. Just exploding all of it, eradicating all evil. So we're actually gonna skip over now to Deathlok, Volume 2, Issue 28, where the goddess actually contacts Deathlok, who is Michael Collins, only to realize that, no, I made a mistake, and she basically rejects him. And then she went over to Luther Manning, who is basically an alternate Deathlok kind of guy. It's a little bit complicated, and basically gets him to join her instead. In Web of Spider-Man issue 106, the fight on Paradise Omega continues. It's a brutal fight, and just really brutal. He's beaten badly by a strong guy, and then he jumps off to help Hercules, I believe, and then the sun explodes. Over to Warlock Chronicles issue 5. Warlock actually learned about past, and it's kind of a sad past, really. She has been trapped on Soul World, or whatever it's called, basically maybe just in his mind, and being tormented by the Magus her entire life, her entire existing. And she obviously is very frustrated that basically she's being put down in so many different ways, and Warlock basically just not attending to her. No, I mean, it's a little bit, she's basically just put to the side all the time, and she's very frustrated, and apparently she just wants things to be under her control, basically, and that's why she wants to explode things. It's a little sad thing, really. So, the Mighty Thor issue 466, Thor fights Drax, and this continues into Warlock and the Infinity Watch issue 21 to 22, continuing the fight between Drax and Thor actually is so much into the fighting and so much, so he actually goes out of the whole belief thing. Actually, he disobeys orders and continues to fight. The sun goes nova, and Warlock actually meanwhile is actually digging through the subconsciousness of the goddess and finds her dark heart. So, in Infinity Crusade issue 6 now, basically the conclusion, the whole thing here, the suns went nova all over the place. However now, Warlock was in the goddess's subconsciousness, and he was in contact with the egg naturally by being on top of her, basically, and he actually had caused a galaxy-wide illusion. So the suns actually never did explode. He just caused everyone else to think that they did. And he did it so perfectly timed that the goddess actually thought that she had caused this. So he basically just took away all of the goddess's believers by showing them that this is what she wants to happen. She wants everyone to die. And no one actually wants that. This is just too much for people to bear, so they basically just stop believing. Thanos and Professor X joins Warlock in a fight against the goddess, very much a mental fight, and eventually the goddess actually loses and is sent into the Soul World to Magus, basically. As just the ghost, the way that he basically was as well. Paradise Omega was basically destroyed along with the cosmic egg and the cosmic cubes and all that stuff. Thanos basically had caused this to happen, and everyone who was on the planet is basically sent back to Earth. So just two small things left here, actually, two issues that still tie into this thing. In Deathlok Volume 2, Issue 29, Deathlok basically, Michael Collins naturally, sees basically an afterlife after he's blown up, so to speak, only through the illusion naturally, and then he's back yet again, kind of thing. The Mighty Thor, Issue 467, barely a tie-in at all, actually, basically just an aftermath, barely even noticing it really. So that's it for this episode, and I hope you have enjoyed this. Subscribe, share, like, all of those stuff. Naturally, all this is Marvel's creations. I'm telling the story. Pretty awesome story, really. Kind of makes you wonder if in the beginning the goddess actually was right by doing this. You know, not blowing up suns or wanting to blow up suns, but to actually take away free will to make the world a better place. I mean, I personally don't think so, but at the same time, if you do that, the world is a safer place. So definitely a thinker there. I would love to see comments on this, and it's actually a very pretty interesting story overall, actually. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and have a good day.